Get ready.
Welcome, everybody, to the latest episode of Gullcast. I'm your host, Brendan Hall. And today, I wish I was making this up, folks. I'm sorry. I don't mean to offend you when I say this and make a joke about this, Will, but I have a legal expert named Will Sue, and I wish I was making that up. But this guy is dynamite in his field, a go-to resource for me when it comes to navigating the tricky world of legalese and esports. Please give a warm Goldcast welcome to William Sue, all the way zooming in from the great motherland of Alberta. How you doing today, Will?
I'm doing good. How are you doing, Brendan?
Excellent, excellent. And it's funny. Before we got on the broadcast here, I mentioned I'll dig in a Calgary Flames question because you're in couple of like you're an Oilers guy, so this has actually been it's been a really good couple of years for you, huh?
Yeah, I've been eating good pretty well. And especially I'm in enemy territory all the time in Calgary, so that's always fun to jab into the Flame fan every so often.
Yeah, I got to say, I imagine last June hurt, but boy, talk about an all-time wagon there. A throwback Florida Panthers team. They really you don't see teams playing the heavy game like that too often. So I don't. That was just an incredibly fun series. Down 3-0, come all the way back. McDavid sets every Stanley Cup scoring record. Seem like I I know this will probably get me beaten up in Alberta, but I actually think McDavid has better stick skills than Gretzky. I don't know. Gretzky behind the net
Yeah,
was revolutionary, but I don't know. He's Alberta's greatest export, but I don't know, man.
yeah, yeah. I mean, it's definitely reminiscent of the best days. I mean, when I grew up in Edmonton, Gretzky was huge, and we had a nice little placard on top of our city signs that says "City of Champions," and
Yeah.
all of our license plates says "City of Champions." So, and it's been a while since we got that removed since our downfall since Gretzky. So hopefully McDavid can take out some old inventory and we can start putting it back on our license plates and signs and whatnot.
It would be well deserved. Hockey's better when the Oilers got a dog in the fight, straight up. So, but let's bring it over to esports here. Well, this is such a fascinating field to jump into, and every single guest I've had on this show really has no two journeys into esports are alike. I think back to, I think Sean, our producer, would remember our episode with BJ Fink talking about how he's an archaeologist before he got into esports. You see some pretty fascinating stories. So I want to set this up. Well, what brought you here?
Yeah, Brendan, I mean, I want to say thank you for having me and thanks for letting me tell my story. So, yeah, my journey in esports started when I was very young. And the one commonality I've seen is you have an older sibling playing video games, you kind of watch them hours and hours on end. And so that's kind of the journey for me was my two big brothers were playing Counter-Strike 1.6 way back in the day. And of course, they're every so often they'd be playing Half-Life Deathmatch, Team Fortress Classic, Warcraft, everything under the sun in gaming. But Counter-Strike really hit a note to me. And so I'm like 8 or 9 years old, and I start playing Counter-Strike 1.6 for the first time. And CS was just like so riveting. It was really like I didn't even understand what was going on because I was too young. But it kind of supercharged my love for video games. And since I was like 8 or 9, I was like I knew I wanted to be a professional gamer. So I was playing Counter-Strike through 1.6, through Source, and then when Go came out, I played a little bit as well. But there was a certain point in Go when I was like, I'm gonna give this the best try I can. I played this essentially game series for a decade, and I was just finished up high school, and I was like, yeah, let's put all our effort in. So my journey in esports started with basically trying to find a bunch of strangers on the net after playing a bunch of ranked, trying to form a team, and then I started my career competing. Uh, and so for anybody who's an old head, there was like Cal, there was, rest in peace, Sivo, ESCA was great. Face It wasn't too big by the time, but they're still doing stuff. ESL was doing open qualifiers.
Yeah.
That was my jam was I'd go to school, and study as hard as I could. I was a great kid, getting all my work done. I made sure to get all my work done at school, and then I go home and play CS:GO for 6, 7 hours a day. And all my weekends were dedicated to tournaments. Uh, and that's how my career began. I was like, you know what? I love this stuff. I'm going to compete in this. So I competed for about, you know, 3 to 5 years ish, going to university and high school, tried my best. I was looking at contracts, to play in California. And the issue was a lot of them are straight up to say garbage contracts. They're like, how I call them starving actor contracts, which is like, all right, we'll have you play here. You get a lot of your money from your like winnings if you win, but like come here, play, and you know, get a second job, go do retail or, be a waiter somewhere, be a busboy somewhere, and then come back and compete and see how things go. And I said, you know what? Like, I've just come off of probably one of the most unique experiences anybody can ever have in esports, which is a really great, good years of like traveling, competing online, meeting some great friends, and I'm still really close friends with them today. Um, Best thing was going to Philadelphia for Philadelphia at a certain point. Um, I said, you know what, that's it. Gotta, I think I gotta either do this or go to law school because that was my backup. So I was like, I'm ready. I'm retired. I'm retired from professional gaming. And I actually quit video games cold turkey for 2 years because I was like, you know what? If I'm going to take professional gaming seriously, I got to take law school seriously. So for the next 2 years, I did cold turkey and just studied nonstop. And then I got to law school and I said, you know what? Like now that I'm here, like I got to get back in the race. Like something's missing. And that's kind of like where my decision went to come back to the industry, which was I helped U of A with their esports association, becoming a pretty big power in the collegiate space in Canada, and even the US a bit when they were able to compete at the Red Bull Valorant events. I believe they went to Brazil for that. We kind of implemented an all female and non-binary gendered Valorant team, which was the first of its kind in Canada. Uh, we got to work with a lot of great brands, Red Bull, Memory Express, it's Canadian IT and computer parts company, and it was phenomenal. And now I'm a full lawyer after taking my lumps and grinding it out. And I'm glad to say that I'm now a vegan lawyer where I'm here where I want to be. I want to give back to community as I always have, and as well as kind of help out the industry that I really fell in love with at such a young age.
That's awesome. You mentioned about contract law, and by the way, that's a great term. I'm gonna have to borrow this one. Starving artist contract. As a former
Yeah.
freelance writer myself, I'm familiar with those 1099 avalanches, but I think it brings to a larger point. So, for instance, we hosted Team Secret, one of the world's most revered Rainbow Six teams, for a boot camp here going into the Six Invitational going on right now in Boston as we record this on February 12th. Um, but you're seeing, even after coming out of group play, right, teams that haven't made it to MGM are already making roster moves. This seems like as somebody who used to work on marketing for a Call of Duty team, and how many roster changes they would make between qualifiers. Um, One of the biggest problems I see, I go back to, for instance, a Call of Duty major we hosted in Boston, and the players we were promoting on the signage, and less than 5 months after the conclusion of the tournament, none of those people are on the roster. And
Yeah.
so I think continuity is a big problem, but how much of that is influenced by the structure of contracts, like independent contractors, et cetera? Like, what are the like? Is there something in the environment that permeates this culture? What can you pin it to?
That's a really good question.
Yeah,
And it's a hot topic in the industry because
yeah,
everybody likes to compare esports to professional sports,
yeah.
and they don't see that kind of like turnaround, turnover with players as much as we kind of do. Although in the current climate between Luca and AD,
Oh yeah,
people are kind of their eyes are on trades pretty deeply right
yeah,
now. But I'll say this that contracts do affect a significant portion of the continuity of teams or the image of teams. And it's also due to the fact that esports, while have been going for so long, in a in their, I guess, course of legitimization and trying to, become more deeply franchised with their structures and more similar to professional sports, a lot of the structures in place and foundations in place are quite in their infancy. It was not too long ago that Tifu had a lawsuit against FaZe because he really didn't like his contract. Um, and there was a lot of discourse about it. But then some of the what people were saying were like, well, half the contract they didn't enforce anyway, so why is Tifu so mad? So you got this really legitimate looking contract, this major, 2 grand an hour lawyer drafting it, and they're not even using it anyways because it was still kind of like, to a certain extent, in between a Wild West and in between a legitimate thing. Um, so a lot of the contracts these days, and it depends the game, depends the company, and it depends where you're going because Team Secret's based out of Europe under Puppy, I believe,
Right.
when he founded it. It's it's difficult to set a legitimate precedent of like having a stable outcome for a lot of esports athletes, having them have a stable presence in the team, and then also having the team itself have a stable presence in the scene because competition is so fierce, um, constant, just like nonstop, fight for attention, fight for winnings, and the contracts themselves are built so that as soon as you become overly burdensome from a financial standpoint or from an attention standpoint, they're usually able to cut you. I mean, take for example a lot of professional sports, NHL or the NFL. The franchise has a ton of bylaws and regulations that make sure that certain people at least have some type of limit for how easy it is to cut them out, or even like make changes to your team. Of course, like trade deadlines is a great one. And League of Legends has done a great job with like trying to create their franchise rules, but sometimes they even have trouble enforcing them. But when you're looking at the other scenes that are more privately run, like CS:GO, for example, is just like a bunch of private businesses running their own tournament scenes under the guise of Steam and Valve. They can't really regulate the team structures and how they deal with the teams very well. When it's the teams are just like, hey, we're going to take a chance on you. We're already usually, and there's another problem. They're already usually like financially pretty restricted. So they got to make quick decisions and they got to make them pretty harshly sometimes. And it sucks, but it's just a tough time when you're trying to make things legitimate. And the environment itself that it is right now is making it quite difficult. So contracts themselves, man, like they still got, I think there was a League of Legends player. I can't remember his name. It might have been Perks. He was on, I think G2 how was having issues
Yeah.
or controversies with essentially like benching players. And it's tough when there's a lot of players being benched and they can't be traded because they're benched or there's something wrong with their contract. And I think there are certain regulations preventing them from basically just being traded off easily. Um, and it's also a legitimate strategy to make it so that if you got a decent player on your team, you bench him so that other players can't have him. Right? And that's kind of what sort of happened for some players in the league. And it's just a whole smorgasbord of turmoil for a lot of these sports players. And it sucks, but you can't change it until there's more money in the scene, there's more legitimacy in the scene. What can you do?
Well, I mean, to that point, because I think you hear a lot about this of, salaries going down because the money's less. Like, where does I just one of the things that I have a hard time reconciling about this industry, right, is, let's take College Football 25. I think
Mm-hmm.
it's now one of the best-selling sports video games of all time, right? I think they onboarded 5 million new users in the first month. Um, Grand Theft Auto 6. I read a newsletter in Hitmarker this morning that they're still planning on releasing it by the end of this year. I think you would agree that whenever this game does come out, it's going to break every single sales record in the industry that's
Yeah.
ever existed,
Yeah.
right? And so, and then even looking at some of the data, Esports Foundry does a lot of good research on at least in the college scene of close to 90%. And Sean, my producer here, definitely included of college age students say they are a gamer, right?
Mm.
This is reflective across Gen Z, Gen Alpha, right? Those numbers keep going up. So like, it's there. And so I have a hard time reconciling facts like that with the turbulence of the industry. You know what I mean? No.
Yeah, I mean, video gaming as a hobby or gaming as a hobby, it's the industry is bigger than all the other entertainment
Yeah.
industries combined, funny enough, like music, movies, TV. It's insane how much popular of a hobby it is. Even in outside the US, like mobile gaming is massive, massive money maker. Um, it's quite a shame that the most common hobby in the world is now essentially, it's really tough on the people who are trying to make a living in the hobby as a professional player, and they can't most of the time. Um, and the issue comes about one, at least from a lot of analysts saying the models themselves that have been propped up in competitive gaming were from a time when everybody was already struggling. It was a passion project. People were playing in basements, and a lot of the models are still, derivative from that era. And of course, you have really innovative models for making sure that teams are financially secure and relevant and profitable, such as 100 Thieves, which is extremely merch heavy. TSM, who built a brand based on winning nonstop. Cloud9 being extremely trendy at the time when they were launching through. Yeah, these models themselves have been quite innovative in those spaces. But yeah, we are seeing the issue of the fact that a lot of these players and all these teams are just not making it. Teams are going bankrupt, um, and players themselves are kind of left out to dry on these like dead contracts, or they're not getting paid out for the tournament winnings and travel expenses and stuff like that. It's unfortunate, and a lot of that is actually propped up by the fact that when it was a blooming, burgeoning era of like, oh my gosh, professional gaming is so interesting. I mean, there's so much buzz around it initially. You had TV shows. What was it? G4 was huge.
Oh yeah.
Machinima was huge. Yeah,
Well, you're
right.
taking me back to my college days watching G4 in my dorm room,
Yeah,
watching Madden
yeah.
tournaments. Yeah. Yeah.
And you're like, oh man, this is so cool. But where the money went, or where the money came from for a lot of this video gaming and professional gaming, was from venture capital and angel investors who are putting a ton and ton of money in these teams. But these teams have yet to find a profitable model. So I think in the US, only two professional gaming teams like were in profit like in the last 2 years. And I think it was like 100 Thieves and gosh, I don't even think it was Cloud9. There was
Was it
another team that
Optic?
was maybe it was Optic,
Yeah.
maybe it was and there was another European team like Misfits was doing well. EG was on the verge of bankruptcy, but then they got bought out. It's it's insane. CLG got bought out because they're like they used to be propped up by Madison Square Garden, and they weren't able to pull through because they just couldn't find a profit model. And a lot of people are now realizing in hindsight 2020, a lot of gaming and professional gaming is targeted towards young people, and the young people have the least purchasing power out of every demographic. I mean, but look at this. Like when you go into professional gaming, a lot of people do it not for the money. They do it because they have a passion and they love it. And the issue is when you go through for things for passion, there's not always a lot of money that's going to
Right. Right.
follow.
No solutions, only trade-offs, right? Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So it's just unfortunate, but now we're in this era, the new era of like maybe we got to figure out how to profit here. So there's people integrating AI, there's people integrating new software solutions, data analytics as a way to be contractors for other teams. That's how people are kind of finding these new models, especially also the collegiate model, which is fantastic. And I'm glad that colleges are getting in on it because they can invest the money into esports, provide a great time for these kids who want to break into it, and facilitate all the resources at the same time because they have the infrastructure.
Yeah. I have a thought on why something an org like 100 Thieves can be successful where others fail. But I first want to ask you about because we've talked about this before, and I think a year ago when we spoke, and I was lamenting the franchise model or like the city-based franchise model in these pro sports,
Hmm.
and then Overwatch League went under, which kind of rectified my stance on that. But and then
Hmm.
they've gone to this open model, right? Overwatch Championship Series. Um, because one of the problems with professional esports is right. So nobody owns football, right? Nobody
Yeah.
owns hockey.
Yeah.
Somebody owns the rights to Overwatch and they can pull the plug whenever they want, right? Um, but I think when you create an environment where, I think people love the underdogs, but like anyone, if you believe in it, you invest in it, you can move up. Creating an environment where look at English Premier League soccer and look at the FA Cup. When a team upsets Liverpool like last weekend, or right, like, but last year, Luton Town, which plays literally in a residential neighborhood that you have to go through someone's backyard to get to the front gate, is playing Manchester United because they
Yeah.
were good enough to get into the Premier League. Like
Yeah.
that stuff's cool. And to create an environment like that in esports where and it's kind of a hybrid model with like if I, maybe you can tell me more, but like League of Legends has like they invest in certain teams or like it seems more open. Like what like is that kind of the model? Do you think like what does success look like in the future here?
Well, League of Legends is, and that's also that's the million-dollar question because
Yeah.
we're all trying to figure out that model. But League of Legends is a really unique instance because they took one of the biggest risks in gaming, which was to heavily invest in the esports ecosystem. I mean, they understood that it was there to be able to be grasped, but they lose a lot of money investing in the esports ecosystem because of the fact that it's so heavily produced. Like if you go to China,
Yeah.
it's amazing. They're propped up by, massive player base and they make a lot of money there.
Yeah.
But at the same time, if you look at the production, man, you cannot have that in the West. Like they have entire blocks of the city lining up.
Oh, it's
They have
insane. Yeah.
A-listers, right? Korea, when Imagine Dragons first time when they were playing a sold out arena in Korea,
Oh my
it
God,
was a
right?
huge watershed moment,
Or
right?
even like, hit like Lil Nas X, stuff like that
No,
too,
not
right?
sex.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's huge. So League of Legends is a unique circumstance where they took a massive risk and it paid off really well because it's become a a self-fulfilling system of we're going to make this super hype, we're going to make the stories, we have our in-house franchising like regulations. This entire model is built upon, making sure that people play the game, people spend money on the game, people have these stories that they're invested in. I mean, I'm pretty sure Faker is the number one paid esports athlete of all time now because his average salary, I believe, is $5 million a year.
Yeah.
So he's getting paid more than some professional
He's
athletes.
certainly been around
Uh,
long enough to earn it, right? So,
exactly, and he's a generational talent. Like
yeah.
you can't discount that. So when it comes to League of Legends, they heavily invested not even just the teams, but they invested in themselves to create that ecosystem that's really dominant. There's no other esports presence that can even match League of Legends. There's prize pools that have tried their best to compete. There's productions that have tried to compete. I mean, Overwatch League was supposed to be a huge thing. Dota, the international, had this massive prize pools going up from the 15 to 20 million. Um, but you just couldn't compete with League because their production was too damn good. I mean, I watch every year. I even play League of Legends. I quit, man, and
Yeah.
I'm like, it's good for me, but I still watch because
Right.
God, it's so entertaining.
Right.
It's so good.
Yeah. League of Legends, watching Rainbow Six right now because of the SI, like that is wildly entertaining. Um, it might be my favorite one to watch, honestly. I just love the dynamic, because I grew up on football and that dynamic of the coach with the headset and the quarterback, and
Yeah,
in our six, you've got guys with clipboards and headsets, and they're doing call outs, and they have tactical timeouts.
yeah.
That stuff is so cool to watch live.
It, And you know what? Like going back, one thing to say, like, yeah, if you watch Worlds, I mean, T1 has like all the teams have a coach in a freaking full suit and tie
Yeah, it's
behind them
incredible.
calling, and then they go, right? It's awesome. It's a legitimate thing. But going back to your original question of what's the model, I mean, it seems like a significant portion of the model, at least from esports ecosystem side, is you're probably going to have to depend on your third party contractors, event management, so your DreamHack and ESL, um, Star Ladder. These guys have been doing it for ages and they've been doing it really well. I mean, DreamHack, of course, I believe got bought out by ESL, but they've been doing it really well over the years. They've been able to find a good model to make sure that they're staying afloat with their event management. It just takes such an upfront cost and upfront risk for these games who do own the game, and they have to justify how it's being profitable. I mean, for example, Blizzard is having a tough time in at least from a public perspective for a lot of gamers, but they are dependent on their shareholders and they are accountable to their shareholders. If you're going to tell shareholders who want that return on their investment, hey, we're going to put in $50 million to make all these arenas and have these franchising agreements and dedicate a ton of production and go, and they ask, what's the return? What's the ROI? What do you think? And it's like, oh, maybe in like 6 years when it's a self-fulfilling,
Yeah.
like self-sufficient, ecosystem, and we maybe we have the risk of like building a really great brand. And during that time, we keep everybody's attention, and Overwatch blows up and becomes the number one esports world. It's like, listen, man, I don't know who you are, but I don't think there's an actor in the world that would say, hey, this is absolutely nuts and risky to invest in. So it's just, you
It's
know,
it's selling it's selling delusion when you should be selling vision, I think. And
exactly. I agree.
yeah, I and when you're pitching something like that and you have all this pomp and circumstance and then you say, well, it's an awareness play. Dude, that gets you fired. I'm sorry. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
and maybe you're kind of, well, the shareholders need to be more impatient. Well, I don't know. It's their dough too, you know?
It's their
So,
money.
right. So I get it. But, I don't, and I do want to get to lightning round in 1 second, but I do
Yeah.
think, um, I'm going to sound like a hopeless optimist, marketing brain here, but the difference with 100 Thieves and others is that community, right?
Yeah.
They spent a better half of the last 2 decades building that community. It takes time. You go to any Call of Duty event, and the by far the biggest crowd is Optic fans. They're
Okay.
nuts. They chant. They're loud. They're boisterous. They're like the Bills Mafia in the NFL when they just descend on a place. It's chaos.
Yeah.
But like they've been doing content since 2006.
Yeah.
They've
Yeah.
worked a long time on this, and patience is not something that is virtuous in industry for whatever reason. But also, so they spend a long time on the audience, and then they just continue to lean into collaborations, right? Partnership is a multiplier game, right? So like when 100 Thieves does a Pokemon collab, you
Yeah.
know, they have something Pokemon wants audience wise, right? And vice versa. It's a mutual benefit, but they've worked a long time to build a really good dialed in community. And then with the merch thing, because again, I don't know how you feel. Well, I've said this on record with other interviews. I've worked in the NFL, I've worked in tech, I've worked in sports media. There is no industry I've ever been a part of that pays this much attention to merch the way that esports does.
Mm.
But
Mm.
a lot of that I think is buggy before the horse. They haven't earned that audience that's going to have that FOMO. Oh my God, there's a pop-up 100 Thieves merch drop somewhere in
Yeah.
LA. I gotta go, right? Companies trying to do that, and they haven't built that community yet because they don't have the patience to understand the long game. I'm kind of going on a TED Talk rant here. I apologize, but like that's kind of how I feel.
Yeah.
At least here domestically in the United States. Obviously you go to Korea and China, you've got decades of really built-in hardcore fan base there. Um, Here domestically, in the United States, I think it's at least from my experience on the pro side, like people were definitely interested. I mean, there's a lot of professors here at Endicott that their teenage kids play Fortnite. So when they see Fortnite running here, they're interested. They
Mhm.
just don't really know a lot, I guess, or they need to be educated a lot. So, and so there's some. I'm curious your thoughts on that, though. Just the whole community aspect.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely derived from the times of which, early esports has been going. It's all been a massive community, and a lot of these teams have been building massive communities. 100 Thieves have done a phenomenal job. Nate Shot is, I would say, very revolutionary in what he's done over there. Um,
Brilliant. Yeah.
and it very brilliant. I mean, he's really caught one of the most interesting uh, points in modern, at least pop culture, which is one, merch drops,
Yeah.
two, streetwear, and three, making it look just good enough, but not actually completely esports,
Yeah.
uh, to really build that community. Because
Yeah.
I kind of get jealous when I see, a really nice merch
Yeah.
drop from 100. It's like, I want that so bad.
The other thing about nature is interesting. I'll let you continue. Sorry, but like,
Yeah,
because I preach a lot about thought leadership and the importance of having someone in your leadership being public facing, right? When Nate Shot streams, he's answering questions in the chat, giving people a peek
yeah,
behind the curtains of how the business works. That's really cool, like because you don't hear that a lot from CEOs. So,
yeah. It's well, I mean that's really important too because
yeah.
the community portion is so important. Like, how deeper are you going to build a connection to a team than to be chatting with their CEO and following their CEO,
Yeah.
right? And you're starting to see this with other major brands as well, endemic brands. Facebook obviously built a lot of personality around Zuck.
Yeah.
All these businesses are now going, hey, you know what? Like, if we want people to be invested in the company, you're going to have to be public facing a lot of the time. Sam Altman, OpenAI, he's outspoken nonstop. But
Very
going back to
outspoken.
esports, very outspoken. And I won't go into the controversies around a lot of the tech stuff going on, but
Yeah.
it's also derivative from TSM back in the day. I mean, I remember the time when TSM was a ragtag set of guys who are like known to be revolutionary because they were like they had a gaming house in LA by the Bay. They had a line called Bay Life, hashtag Bay Life. If any OGs are listening, that'll ring a few bells.
Oh yeah.
Um, and they had they had like a web series, and it was run by, and the CEO was Reginald, of course. He was competing at the time, but they had a web series by Snapdragon. I think Qualcomm owns Snapdragon, and they build processors for your phone. And it was just like a super in-depth look into, what goes on to the professional gaming, what goes on to the business, and how, what kind of the disagreements go on in it. Because that was a major drama thing. It was reality TV, man, and you put it in front of a bunch of immature, gamers with a lot of money. They're gonna be spoiled out of their mind playing video games 10, 12 hours a day and getting mad at each other. And there was a huge community built upon it. And it's one of the reasons why TSM built so much goodwill. Um, it's unfortunate what's going on right now, but and I wish them the best. But at the same time, like, community is so important. When Optic was being bought back, there was a huge uproar in the community because they're like, Optic was gone, and they got bought back by the original creator of Optic, and everybody's like, holy smokes, like, we love it, let's go.
Yeah.
When FaZe was IPOing, man, people were going nuts. And FaZe got recently, and that's how we met. Was
Yeah.
I was writing about how FaZe got bought back by
Yes.
the OGs, right?
And I don't. By the way, I don't think that's totally worked out for them. I think giving the keys to the car, keys to the car back to the guy who crashed it in the first place. I don't know. I wouldn't. Uh, you know.
Hey, I as much as I have comments about how FaZe is run, I gotta respect the guy. The man sold
Hey.
high,
Yeah.
bought it low again, and you know
Yeah.
what? He could do it again.
He's
I
just
respect
riding
the
the
hell out of
wave,
it.
baby. You know.
Yeah, it's so smart,
Yeah.
like he's, I can't say too much about a guy, and FaZe is a little bit loaded among the gaming community, but you know what? If you're telling me this guy made $100 million off selling his really endemic professional gaming brand, and he bought it back for pennies on the dollar, once it's gone downhill a little bit, like, genius,
Yeah.
absolute genius. But that's besides the fact.
Yeah.
Community is still nonetheless very important. I mean, like, all these players are trying to build the communities, and all the CEOs are trying to build communities because that's part of the only model that's going to work. It's a passionate industry, so you got to build passion and you got to invest that passion in somebody. And when that passion is invested in somebody, that's when the money's going to come. It's not always guaranteed, of course. I mean, we have so many passionate people in the gaming industry that have seen, rough starts or rough ends to their professional game career just because the money wasn't there. But that is at least the first ingredient to success amongst all the business models so far, because 100 Thieves have done it. TSM were doing it for a long time. Cloud9 have done fantastic for themselves. China and Korea, like that's what it is. That's literally it. If we model after, uh, I read somewhere that like the most common gender for a fan of T1 is female. And that blows my mind because I'm like, oh, so they're actually just like essentially K-pop stars now.
I
Like
could
they're
tell
not.
you so many little anecdotes here. Our student body is close to 70% female. We have a huge nursing program with a 100% pass rate on state board exams, and that fuels a lot of the enrollment here.
Mhm,
And they love Fortnite. They love Roblox. Our most popular events here during the semester are Dress to Impress events where we get 40, 50 female students crowding our 15 PC lab. Um, well, and then we have a women's varsity Fortnite team. They're having a blast. Their streams get twice as many views as our mainstream.
mhm.
Um, I tell this funny anecdote. I was over winter break. One day I was opening a lab, and the entire women's basketball team stopped by complaining that matchmaking wasn't working in their dorms, and can they play here? Because Fortnite, and then we get in the thing about Fortnite. I hate this Typhoon Blade melee because it's a cheat. I'm like, well, yeah, that's why I like it because I'm not very good. So
Yeah.
yeah, so they game. They game. They need a space of psychological safety. And hey, you can game to your heart's content. And so but for us here, growing that end of it is super imperative for us.
Mhm.
So
It's it's been an interesting journey where, at least on the collegiate esports side, um, and public schooling side, because now they're trying to add esports programs more to a lot of public schools, at least here up in Canada.
yeah.
Um, it's been a really good journey communicating with a lot of like upperclassmen or just seniors, being like, hey, you know what, like you're trying to get more involvement from non-male participants and people who are more marginalized or visual minorities. Like, well, gaming is their go-to because gaming, you're anonymous, and they found it a really great safe space to express themselves, build teamwork, build long-lasting relationships. I mean, just recently I was like, I think 1 or 2 weeks ago, I met somebody who was currently attending Harvard, and she only plays video games on the weekends, on Fridays and Saturdays. So I'm like, oh, I get why you made it at Harvard because I can't do
Yeah.
that. But I was like, oh, we're gonna play some League of Legends, and she was like late to our League of Legends because we're just waiting for her. I'm like, oh, what were you doing? She's like, oh, I was on Roblox. I was like, okay, you
Yeah.
just I'm like,
Yeah.
okay, yeah, that's fine. Like, it was fun, but that's that's the demographic that we're seeing that has been more inclusive than a lot of different hobbies and pastimes that people invested in on campuses. Because where did they go to when they were, being bullied at school, or they didn't get to see, their chance to be popular in school? Well, go home, play some video games with some strangers online, and have a good time. I mean, I'm pretty sure I'm inviting I'm like a good 20% of my wedding that's eventually going to happen is like people from out of Alberta, because it's people I play video games with, and they've become so great to me and great mentors, ranging like younger to me to older than me. Like when I was young, man, when I was 8 years old playing Counter Strike, and people were scared that I was going to get abused online, because that was the time when people were like, "Oh my God, the internet's so scary. There's strangers and all this
Oh
stuff. It's
yeah.
so
Oh
dangerous."
yeah.
That was the safest place I was ever. I was indoors talking with some great people who gave me a lot of life advice. A lot of life advice. When people ask me, oh, how'd you talk so well when you're so young? Like, you're so good at communication when you're a kid. Like, it's always impressive when a little kid who barely speaks English starts to communicate really well out of the blue. It's like, well, it's because I'm talking to like 100 people every Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And I don't know their name. I know their username, but we're just like nonstop interacting and talking, playing video games, and enjoying ourselves.
Yeah. No, look, when I was a kid, right? and you wanted to play, let's say GoldenEye against someone outside of your house, right? You had to like make friends in the lunchroom at school.
Yeah.
Now, if you want to play, you want to run Fortnite deals with someone halfway across the world, you press like three buttons.
Yeah.
And that's a stupendous leap forward for technology inside of 25 years. And I think to your point about kind of, social tribes, right? And learning that there's people that are like you out there in the world. They're just a little bit of a way of distance. Like what that does for mental health and teenage angst, all that stuff. I mean, it's tremendous,
Yeah.
tremendous. So,
Yeah.
um, do we want to get in the lightning round real quick, or as I call it, the thunder
Let's
round?
do it.
Let's rock and roll.
Yeah, let's go do some thunder round. Let's go.
Thunder round. I call this a thunder round because it's supposed to be lightning round, but ends up being like a rolling thunder. We have to like we have offense. So I'll start with this. Will, this is one of my favorite questions I ask every guest. What is the worst advice you ever got in your career?
The worst advice I ever got in my career was to stick your head down and take it. And that's a common one. I mean, that doesn't mean, fight back immediately, but it's
Yeah,
kind of like it's an old-fashioned idea that's kind of not fitting as well with the current generation of the
totally
workforce.
agree. Totally agree.
Like sometimes, man, you got to stick out for yourself. You got to look out for yourself. The more you take it, man, the more they're going to be able to bully you. And that's it's applicable to not just school, but to jobs, office politics. You got to look out for yourself when, the world is, in my opinion, based on how I see the internet, collapsing.
Yeah, yeah.
So, so sticking up for yourself is huge and making sure that, hey, you're looking out for yourself and making sure that things are going well for you. Because at the end of the day, it's kind of pessimistic, but the only people that are going to care for you that are not you, usually your parents and your loved ones. And for some people, that's not even true. And it's unfortunate, but gotta look out for yourself. Yeah.
What is an unpopular opinion that you stand on?
Oh, Lord. Uh, I think, gosh, let's not get too controversial now. I think, I think that a lot of professional gaming needs to go away from the idea of constantly being stuck to your computer or your console. I think even though that's very useful and that's how we practice and it's modeled after Asia who practice 14 hours a day. And that's why Lloyd's of London insure their risks for millions of dollars,
Yeah.
but they're ruining their lives essentially. And a lot of data has come out that like you got to be healthy, you got to be fit. You need to if you're going to be professional gaming, you need to look after your nutrition. So my main hot take is just, if you want to enjoy professional gaming and for this professional gaming to thrive, there's got to be healthier implementations in this ecosystem because at the end of the day, nobody can love video games 16 hours a day when you're practicing. And I've done it. I
Yeah.
love Counter-Strike. Counter-Strike was the biggest thing in my life. I still look back and go, oh, that was like some of the fondest memories of my life. And I got to say, even then, living my dream, you can't do 16 hours a day and say, yeah, I'm healthy. I'm enjoying my
Yeah.
life. It's just tough. You're not eating, you're not you're not hydrating.
Yeah.
Come
Well,
on.
you're not eating and hydrating well. Like if you're
Yeah,
eating because you don't want to miss it, you're getting something off DoorDash, right?
that's right.
Right. Right. So yeah, I
Eating
mean,
frozen meals, Doritos, Mountain
yeah.
Dew, Red Bulls. Like I love Red Bull. It saved me. I love Red Bull. It saved me so many times inside and outside gaming, studying all this stuff. Red Bull's great.
I'm right there with you, dude. My blood type is Red Bull at this point, but no, yeah, touch grass, and what that does, also from a team bonding standpoint,
Yeah,
working out together, right? Why is it that in traditional sports the culture starts in the weight room, but less so in esports?
yeah.
Uh, And that could just
And
be
I
a
gotta
hot take opinion
say,
myself, but yeah,
one of the most innovative things I was trying to get done was if anybody pays attention to Canadian football, the Edmonton Elks. When I was working with the University of Alberta Esports Association, we were trying to set up a thing called touch grass games, and it was going to be esports related, where you had these massive football players pairing up with all of our esports and esports athletes and students, And we were just going to go in through their stadium and, essentially do a lot of physical exercise, do a lot of great fun, physical games. Like we're going to do like probably see who could run the farthest in the football field, because you had all these nerds who are just like, oh, like I can't breathe in this
Yeah.
outdoor air. And they had gamers as well on the football team who wanted to, compete with us because you had these young kids who were really good. They had a top Apex Legends player. Like he was in the highest ranked of Apex. I'm not going to repeat the rank because
Yeah.
yeah. But
Yeah. Yeah.
uh, he loves video games, and we were thought, this would be a great time
Yeah.
to connect the two because
Yeah.
we all got to be healthy and we got to get some air in. And honestly, it was the only chance we would get some air because in winters in Canada, I mean, you get 3 months of
If
summer
you're
and
lucky,
then
right?
9 months. If you're lucky, yeah, you get 3 months of summer, you get 9 months of construction in winter. So it's
It
nothing else to do.
sounds a lot like Massachusetts. 6 months of
Yeah,
winter and then six of
yeah,
construction, and then there's like 3 weeks of leaf peeping somewhere in there. So
exactly.
yeah, yeah, yeah. But by the way, the amount of I learned this from the Bruins recently. The amount of like players that take their gaming laptops with them on the road is higher than you think. So that was kind of cool to learn that.
There's a photo somewhere, I think it was
Yeah,
the Lakers, who
yeah.
had like a rolling Counter-Strike LAN like set up in their planes and their buses. Like they're
Oh
just playing
man.
Counter-Strike together, right? Like it's awesome.
It's a great way to unwind, not gonna lie. Not a great way to, after a long day of work, unwinding on some Fortnite a little bit. That's it's good stuff. It's
Luka
good stuff.
Doncic's top 500 Overwatch, so shows
Yeah.
what's up.
Uh, what is a prediction you have for the future of esports?
I think that there's going to be another readjustment, not as heavy as esports winter, because we're kind of going back into a more stable time. But I think there's going to be another readjustment when the people or the teams and stakeholders that have lasted this long through the esports winter and just catching this again. I think they're going to stick to a lot of the business models they kept to, and that's not going to be sustainable. When at the end of the day, we're going to be prioritizing a lot more lean operations. There's going to be a shortage of venture capital because there's not going to be a historic return on esports as much as we would like. So there's going to be a major readjustment. Not as bad as the esports winter for sure, but it's gonna be there.
Yeah. What's a piece of advice? I'd say what would be the most important piece of advice that you have for esports students looking to break into the industry?
That's a good question. I mean, there's no linear path as we've all talked to. Like I'm sure everybody who you've asked probably had a different answer to a certain extent on how to
Oh
break
yeah.
it because there really is no, silver bullet. But I'll say one thing that I found that has been really pragmatic is playing different games than you're used to. Funny enough. Uh, and not just saying like, hey, just play video games, like whatever, you'll get an industry. I mean, like when you talk to somebody in an industry and they ask you, what's your favorite video game and what you've been playing recently? A lot of the time, if you say your general Call of Duties, your World of Warcrafts, they'll understand that you love video games and you're into the hobby. But I've seen a lot of people roll their eyes at it. And so it kind of delegitimizes you if you're not, invested in the industry beyond just playing the standard video games that everybody finds popular. Um, I there's a Canadian guy I know who I talk to consistently, and I asked him, what have you been playing recently? And he said Darkest Dungeon, and I'm like, well, that's a really great indie game, like impressive. Like that took me back. I was like, "Man, Darkest Dungeon. I haven't talked about anybody with Darkest Dungeon." And yeah, because one, it's Canadian run. It's Darkest Dungeon 2 came out, and it's actually a great answer to like an interview question because if you can play Darkest Dungeon, that means you can sit through losing it all and like getting back into it and playing really difficult games. So the tip would be, I guess, in a video game sense, broaden your horizons so that when somebody asks whether or not you're into video games and professional gaming, you don't just come off as the next, you know, I love Call of Duty. I love Fortnite. I love Apex. Like have some roots in gaming beyond what people might find you to be generic.
Yeah.
That's it.
I love that advice because I tell students all the time, Sean has heard me say this before, dreams don't have to die, but they do need space to evolve. And if I
Yep.
had if I had set on my path of I'm going to be the next great Boston sport, I would never have discovered this wonderful industry. And I do find in any industry, sports, esports, business, you name it, the most revered thinkers, the most innovative thinkers are routinely the ones that are willing to draw inspiration from outside their comfort zone, right? Chip Kelly, who was just named the offensive coordinator of the Las Vegas Raiders, won a title with Ohio State last year. He's often considered one of the more progressive offensive minds in football. There was one off season he was stuck for answers when he was coach at UCLA. He went and visited a high school coach in Idaho and camped out for 3 days there. Um, Bill Belichick of our
Bill
beloved
Belichick.
New England Patriots. There's a high school coach in Arkansas um, who is a very, very analytical mind, and he's famous for never punting and always onside kicking. And it's based on data research that concludes that we don't value possession enough. Um, Belichick would fly this guy in once a year to talk to his special team staff. Bill Belichick,
Yeah, that's
humble
crazy.
enough to talk to a high school coach in Little Rock, Arkansas, about how he manages special teams. So it doesn't surprise me when those people are so revered, and I think that goes for any industry is expect the unexpected or you'll never find it, right?
Yeah.
So that might be a good walk off here, folks. Will, I could do 3 more hours of this, but
Likewise.
we might be getting to billable hours if I do too much more here. But um, for people who want to follow you because you do some awesome work on LinkedIn. You're a great follow on socials. How can people get in touch with you? What's the best way to follow your work?
Yeah, I mean, always happy to connect with like-minded individuals or just anybody who wants to chat on LinkedIn. I think my LinkedIn link is linkedin.com/Will Sue Law, which is I was very lucky to get that.
That is
Um,
very lucky. Yeah.
but yeah, like just reach out on LinkedIn. I'm always available to just chat and consult. If you want to shoot me an email, my email is william.sue@nicolaw, spelled NICOLLAW.ca. I'm in a Canadian law firm, but I specialize in startups, corporate, commercial work, intellectual property, game development, esports, everything under the sun, whether that's tech adjacent or tech. I help with financing, mergers and acquisitions, just if you want to start up a corporation. And you know what? I might not be helping you all the time out in Boston because I'm not called in Boston, but I think at least I can add value with a nice conversation
Yeah.
to double check on something anybody wants to look at or even connect people with who they want to connect. I'm always available to chat if anybody wants to chat.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, Will, this has been fantastic. Like I said, I could go 4 more hours with you here. This is an awesome conversation that everyone here is going to get a lot out of. So, but signing off for now, on behalf of Will Sue, this is Brennan Hall from the Gullcast. Make sure to follow us on Spotify and YouTube. YouTube, you can just check our channel at Endicott Esports and look us up on Spotify. It's Gullcast, Endicott Esports. For now, for Will Sue, this is Brendan Hall signing off. See you next time. Thanks everyone for tuning in. Be sure to follow us at Endicott Esports. See you next time.